Air Force Academy football coach Troy Calhoun joins us. 365 Sports, Baylor, and Air Force coming up. The Falcons and the Bears on Saturday evening at McLean Stadium. Coach, thank you very much for your time. How much of what you learned as someone who was in the academy, and then, of course, under Fisher DeBerry and elsewhere, but how much did you learn as someone in that institution on what it means to play for Air Force Academy?
You know, David, an immense amount, right? I mean, you're immersed in it every single day while you attend the United States Air Force Academy, and have you're fully invested when it comes to the character part of it, the leadership growth, certainly academically, and yet at the same time want to try to play solid competitive football too.
When you look at the mission of someone, my father, Paul Catalina, who's one of our co-hosts, his father was U.S. Army. My dad was Naval Academy, but he spent most of his career as a lieutenant colonel, eventually retired in the Air Force. What is the mission, and how much does that carry over to the players who you coach and how they feel about it?
David, it's every single day, you know, unequivocally the purpose of the United States Air Force Academy, and that is to develop leaders of character that are prepared to go out and serve well on active duty, and beyond that, though, too, whether it's in their, you know, within their communities, or certainly for our country, both, you know, while wearing the uniform and as a civilian.
Troy Calhoun, head coach at Air Force, with us. They play Baylor on Saturday night. So you started out 1-1. I know San Jose State was the most recent win. How long do you let a win or a loss before you clear it for the next game?
You know, you usually give yourself about 12 hours. And I say that in the sense that what you do want to do is there's so many things that you learn from a previous game, and you want to be able to share that with your coaches and with your players, just to learn from past experiences, and then you have to move forward thereafter.
What was the best advice besides everything that Fisher DeBerry gave to you or taught you?
You know, more than anything else, you got to go full throttle every single day. And you realize how fortunate you are to be alongside young men, young women that chose to come to the United States Air Force Academy. Certainly not. And it wasn't because it was easy. They came because there was something in their heart, in their soul, where they said, you know, I want to serve. I want to give to my country.
How much do you think the bowl game in Fort Worth plays at all into this week with Baylor? You spanked them really well. By the way, that was a freezing night, as you know, up at Amon Carter. Does anything at all come from that game either way?
A little bit, perhaps, David, from the standpoint that personnel-wise, probably more for Baylor's sake, because they had about 10, 12 guys that played double-digit snaps in that game where we only had one. Yet, by and large, I mean, boy, especially with the kind of turnover there is in this day and age in college football, you look at it, neither one of their coordinators from the 22 season is currently there. The number of new guys that they have on their team, certainly at quarterback, you know, the acquisitions that have occurred via the portal route. So there's a lot there where there are no resemblances too.
You, of course, get some cold weather in Colorado Springs and places you've played up in the north and northwest and around the country, Air Force, Army, Navy games as well. Can you put that game as far as the weather with the wind chill in perspective in your career and how cold it was?
It was legendary.
Legendary.
You know, I think at some point, someone told me at one point it was like 15 degrees with a wind chill of -20.
Yeah.
I hope we never experience anything like that again in terms of the climate yet. Whether it's really warm, really cold, whatever it may be, we are grateful for the chance to play college football. And I think by and large, especially when you're a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy, you know, there's so many other demands that you have. You're taking 18 or 21 semester hours. 2 levels of calculus, aeronautical engineering, astronautical engineering. You have all your military and your squadron obligations. That in a lot of ways, when you go out to practice, even if it's only for an hour and 20 minutes, that might be the best part of your day.
It might be. How did you juggle that as someone that was there and as a student and a part of serving your country?
Well, David, like my own children, my son and my daughter remind me frequently, it must have been a lot easier then, especially academically. And just more than anything else, I think the structure, the organization, your peers, you learn really to lean on each other. That's part of building the kind of teamwork and trust that's a necessity when you are on active duty. Again, the character part of it is huge.
You were on active duty. What was that like for you? And then you got back into coaching, came back to the Air Force Academy. I think as a GA, recruiting coordinator, then Ohio and on to elsewhere. What was that like being a part of active duty compared to when you're on campus as you're getting towards your graduation in Colorado Springs?
Well, it's real. It's sobering. Worked in a field where it was, if the president had to send in an EAM, that's an emergency action message, that means launch, whether it's the old ICBMs or the short range missiles within theater in Europe or from the subs. I mean, it just kept you very, very alert. You hope to know when. It's kind of like when you go over here and we visit NORAD. You hope that those items are never brought into play for real, but you realize it's a must just for the sake of deterrence.
Troy Calhoun, again, the head coach at Air Force with us. The Falcons and Bears play Baylor at McLean Stadium on Saturday evening. You are wearing those unbelievable uniforms. Baylor's wearing black ops uniforms. It's going to be an amazing scene. Your thoughts about just the game itself?
David, I'll say this. I mean, you have 2 fantastic institutions. The quality of school, the character part of it when you're talking about Baylor and the United States Air Force Academy, and even more so, the people, the young men and young women that go to each one of the institutions, just their makeup, the commitment when it comes to the character growth by both schools, and then obviously they are exceptional in sports. I mean, it is impressive, and how many different sports Baylor is so strong, not only within the Big 12 but nationally too.
What are your thoughts about where we are with college football, with all the changes, NIL, transfer portal? The academies, of course, have been able to stay to who you are. There's maybe 1 or 5 other schools that have not really done much of that. People say that if you don't do it, you suffer. But you guys have your values. What are your thoughts about where we are, Troy, right now when it comes to college football?
Well, I'll say this. We can never lose sight of the educational component to help a young person grow as a human being, and truly to embed some qualities, whether they're skills or an educational foundation or some leadership aptitude too that they carry forth when they're done playing sports. And I think we're all as committed as we've ever been to help young people that way. When it comes to NIL, David, I am a complete proponent and in favor of NIL. I mean, we live in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
If there's value that you do have, we see it with coaches that might move from one job to another. We see it in about any line of work, any industry. And so I think a player should be able to do that too. As we look forward, at some point, inevitably, there's going to be some kind of contractual agreement that's even more binding. I think as somebody that's a performer, a producer, an employee, if you will, and it'll be interesting to see just how soon we get to that, get to that point in time.
When you arrived on campus as a part of being accepted into the academy and you played as a freshman, did you have any idea that you could And what was it like when you made the team as a freshman and a team that I think maybe went 11 or 12-1 that year? That's amazing.
Oh, David, I'll tell you frankly, I think I fell into a big old bed of four-leaf clovers. I mean, to be real, we had some really, really talented seniors that were extremely experienced. And it was at a point in time, and we're going back here now just a couple of years. It was in the 1980s, where I think, that sports, especially the connection when it came to being able to serve on active duty, just the vibe around the United States Air Force Academy, just during those years, how really every single person was trained to have a mindset of a fighter pilot, even if you didn't end up becoming a fighter pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And they were great, great years. And yet still, those experiences, that kind of heritage that you still pull and draw from.
You spent time in the NFL with the Broncos and also with the Texans. And then all of a sudden, your alma mater head coaching job becomes open when Fisher DeBerry decided to retire. What was that like? How quickly did they either contact you or you them? And how quickly did you want that job? And what does it mean to you when you got the job?
I'll tell you this, when I had no idea it was going to occur. And then when I was first asked by the administration, I said, absolutely no way. And we loved living in Houston, being a part of the Texans, worked for incredible people with, alongside, to get a chance to work for Gary Kubiak
mm-hmm.
as a head coach there in Houston. We had an ownership group at that time with the McNair family that was all in. They were committed to try to truly build a franchise that was very, very young. And my wife's from Pearland, Texas, there on the south side of Houston. Yeah. So I thought not a chance in the world. And then about 48 hours, I was like, that's the Air Force Academy. Those young men, young women have made a commitment to serve. And I was like, how do you say no when somebody's asking you to come back to help guide and mentor our young people that want to go fight for our freedoms?
What does it mean to coach them?
Well, it's much bigger than just coaching a sport. And you're trying to embed or help them further, embed a set of values that help them not only when they're a second lieutenant, when they're commissioned as an officer in the United States Air Force or the Space Force, because we do feed both
mm-hmm.
Branches of service. And I think where you find it most moving is you can recall interacting with that young person when they were 17, in their senior year of high school or late in the junior year, and they really had no idea about the Air Force Academy, had no idea about the Air Force. And a lot of times, a lot of circumstances, neither did the parents. And I don't say that in the demeaning way, because I completely identify with that. I had no idea about the Air Force Academy when I was a junior in high school. And yet just see to see the transformation that occurs. They plod their way, because that's through the rigors of the Air Force Academy. They're 22. They graduate and they go serve, and lo and behold, there they are 4 or 5 years later, and they're flying F-35s, or they're a doctor in the Air Force, or they've gone to law school, or they're in special ops. And it's overwhelming to see the growth and the perspective and, the will that they have to make our country a stronger place to live.
Troy Calhoun, Air Force football coach. Just a couple more questions. Thank you so much for your time. When you were in the lumber business, or as a kid in Oregon, how much did that teach you you talked about Coach DeBerry, full throttle every day. How much did that help you grow up pretty quickly?
Well, I was fortunate. My dad was a teacher and a coach at the high school level. And then my mother was an emergency room nurse. And obviously in that area of the country, there were a lot of really serious accidents. I mean, truly, you look, whether it's deep sea fishing or the lumber industry, especially then, because literally you're cutting down trees, whether it's slivers, whether it was logs tumbling. You have to soak the logs to be able to peel the bark, and once in a while there's just an awful,
Mm-hmm.
something falls in terms of a power line or something like that, and it's well, I know we really, really get wrapped up in winning and losing a game, but there were times when my mom would come home and I thought, oh goodness, there was a tough accident that happened, obviously, and you learn to never take life for granted, how short it truly is. And I think if anything, it was inspiring to think that, you know what, we got to make the most of each and every single day. And it made you even more committed to live in a country where we do have values. And more importantly, we have freedoms that we are able to exercise, and never assume that that's automatic.
What is it about Air Force football? And you guys had a pretty big night passing the ball in that weather against Baylor, and won that game going away, dominated that game. But what is it about your football program that you think might not be known?
Well, you've covered it, David. I say from the sense, you mean really? These guys, every single one of them has to be at least a 3.5 student out of high school, and we're test mandatory. They have to have over a 1,200 on the SAT, or they really are going to take 2 levels of calculus and physics and chemistry and all the engineering classes. And yeah, they are, where the respect that they have to have for their body, and yet ultimately to be able to raise their right hand and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'll go fight for our Constitution, and wherever I'm asked to serve, I'm all in. I just find it amazing. It's just absolutely astounding because candidly, I mean, we live in a country where less than 1% choose to serve, and yet these young men and young women, that's exactly what they're going to do for all of us, for the other 99+%.
Is it different when you play somebody else like Army and or Navy when it is compared to anyone else you play?
Every game truly is unique. Certainly when you play those two contests, and in pregame you have the march on from both sides, and you're saying, lo and behold, look at these 19 and 20-year-olds, and who knows where they're going to be globally in the next 3 or 4 years. I don't think anybody can forecast over the next 12 months what may happen, whether it's, in the Middle East, whether it's somewhere in the Korean Peninsula, whether it's close to the Formosa Straits or with China, or even in Eastern Europe. And yet in their own way, if we say that's where you're going, they've already said, I've signed up.
Yeah. And as a military brat, I loved every day I was a part of it. We went, born in Nebraska, moved to Guam, went to Arizona, Luke Air Force Base, then the Pentagon, to San Antonio at Randolph, and then Japan, and then back to Randolph. And so I didn't serve. My father did. Paul's father did. Craig's grandfather did. But I love listening to you talk about it. Coach, thank you so much for your time. Look forward, and hopefully if I get a chance, I'll shake your hand without getting in your way on Saturday evening at McLean Stadium.
Oh, I'd love that, David. Yeah, and I'll tell you, as you went through that roll call right there, I thought, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Did he live at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam? Did he live where they had offered in Omaha?
Yeah, I was.
As you peel through each one of those, yeah. I think, how incredible.
I was actually born at Offutt Air Force Base, then moved to Anderson Air Force Base. I was like 1, and we went over, I think, even on like an aircraft carrier or something. I don't know what it was. And then I said, Luke, again, Pentagon, Randolph, and then when I was at Yokota, eventually. They put a lot of consolidated some Air Force bases there, an unbelievable Air Force base in Japan. Troy, Coach Calhoun, thank you so much for what you represent and also for giving us this time.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. Because, the other part of it, you just brought to light the family sacrifices that are made. by our service members. You know, when you're deployed, and whether it's mom or dad, and they're alone raising the kids, and for, you know, the challenges that they have, because it truly is a family commitment. So thank you to you and your family too.
Thank you very much. Troy Calhoun, Air Force, United States Air Force Academy Falcons head football coach, with us on 365 Sports.